Hello, John Marcus. How are you?
I am fine, Dave, thank you. What can I do for you?
I could not help listening to you sharing your beliefs with Joseph yesterday. I noticed that you hold to the error of eternal security. That belief is dangerous. It is a permit to immorality.
Why would you say that, Dave? I do not live an immoral life. I serve the Lord and strive to maintain a pure life. That is also what I share with others. I believe in salvation by grace through faith according to Ephesians chapter 2 verses 8 and 9.
I understand that Ephesians 2, 8 and 9 teaches that. But Galatians 5, 2 through 4 says that one can fall from grace. As far as faith goes, Paul teaches in Romans 5, 1, that we are justified by faith, but in 1 Timothy 1, 19 and 20 Paul states that faith can become shipwrecked. Do you know what that means, John?
I would be glad to hear you explain, Dave.
It means that faith can be destroyed. Your faith can vanish, and you can become faithless according to Luke 8:13 and Romans 11:19 through 23. Now, the Bible states that without faith it is impossible to please God in Hebrews 11:6.
Can I stop you for a minute, Dave? You have given me quite a few verses there, and I assume that you may have more verses to give me, but I am going to loose you. Why don't we look at each verse carefully to see if we are on the same page? Would that be okay with you?
Certainly.
I just don't want to toss verses back and forth like a ping-pong game because that is not what the Bible is for. I am sure you agree. Let me see if I understood you. Going back to Ephesians 2, 8 and 9, if salvation is by grace and therefore a free gift, and not of works, how can other verses contradict that? Wouldn't that be salvation by works? The Bible is not a book of contradictions.
You are confusing truth with legalism. Paul said in Romans 6, 14 and 15, that we are not under the law, but if you live according to the sinful nature you will die spiritually in Romans chapter 8 verse 13. It is possible to die spiritually once you are saved according to Ezekiel chapter 3 verse 20, chapter 18 verse 24, and chapter 33 verses 12 and 13. Also, you have a wrong concept of grace. You see, grace teaches us to say no to ungodliness and worldly passions, and to live self-controlled, upright and godly lives in this present age according to Titus 2:12.
All right, Dave. I agree with you that the verses you have given me say what they say as they are read in the Bible. I just don't agree with your explanation. Again, I do not want to feel like we are playing biblical ping-pong. Let us look at these verses in their context. Let me start with Ephesians and we will look at each of the verses you gave me within their proper context. Shall we?
All right, explain away.
I think you agree with me, as far as I can tell, that Ephesians 2 verses 8 and 9 state that salvation is a free gift of God that we receive through faith and that we cannot obtain through works. The difference is that you believe that we can lose that free gift and I do not believe that we can lose that free gift. You proceeded to support your argument with verses that seem to state that one can fall from grace, faith can be lost, and one can die spiritually after being saved. Another difference is your definition of grace and my definition of grace. Let me start with the definition of grace. I agree with how you scripturally defined grace. But that is not all that grace is. You see, grace is also God's sufficiency in the life of the believer as God told Paul in 2 Corinthians 12:9. My grace is sufficient for thee, for my strength is made perfect in weakness. Paul also stated in 2 Corinthians 9:8, and God is able to make all grace abound toward you, that ye, always having all sufficiency in all things, may abound to every good work. So God's grace working in us supplies sufficiency for us to do every good work. Notice that it is for us to do every good work. Because of God's grace I am equipped to live morally since He equips me with the sufficiency to do every good work. Paul himself acknowledged in 1 Corinthians 15:10 that he was all that he was because of God's grace in him. So in one sense grace can be defined as God's sufficiency in equipping us freely. After telling us in Romans 3:24 that we all have sinned, and come short of the glory of God, Paul states in the next verse that we being justified freely by His grace through the redemption that is in Christ Jesus. Notice that Paul tells us that we are justified freely, and let me emphasize again the word freely, justified freely by His grace. The words grace and freely go hand in hand in this verse. Therefore, grace is God's free means of justifying us. That is why I believe that grace is an unmerited free gift. In New Testament times, grace was used in reference to the kindness of masters towards their servants, and hence it was also understood as God's undeserved kindness towards man. Now keep in mind that Jesus himself taught that servants were to do what was their duty without expecting anything in return in Luke 17:9 and 10, that after the master eats and drinks does he thank that servant because he did the things that were commanded him? I trow not, meaning, I think not. So likewise ye, when ye shall have done all those things which are commanded you, say, We are unprofitable servants, we have done that which was our duty to do. So we see that in those days masters were rough on their servants, and kindness on the part of the masters was an option. Being that said, we as servants have received unmerited grace from God freely. If Ephesians 2:8 and 9 tells us that salvation is by grace through faith and that both of these are a gift, then grace is an unmerited gift of God. Do you agree with the definition of grace, Dave?
Not quite, John. In Genesis 6:8 we are told that Noah found grace in the eyes of the Lord. Now, humanity was living wickedly and immorally in those days, and Noah found grace in the eyes of the Lord. John, do you know why Noah found grace in the eyes of the Lord?
I do, Dave. But please tell me what you think, just in case I am wrong.